The long-awaited episode
has come at last,
and it delivers a great character arc with Ahsoka, but I have seen many confused about the lesson Anakin was trying to teach her, and that's what I'm going to explain in this video. To understand Anakin's lesson, you must first understand that Ahsoka really blames herself for Anakin turning to the dark side, and fears that such a legacy of destruction could be repeated. This is exactly why she refused to train Grogu in Mandalorian Season 2. Once she noticed that he is very strong with the Force and has great attachment to Mando, which leaves him vulnerable to his fears and anger, she says she cannot train him because even the best of them, aka Anakin, was corrupted by such feelings.
I've seen what such feelings can do to a fully trained Jedi Knight. To the best of us.
Ever since she discovered that Vader was her former master, she has been a completely different person. This is why she is always wearing the color gray now. Gray can symbolize depression and loss. Its absence of color makes it dull. And this is exactly how Ahsoka has been ever since discovering Vader's true identity. Dull, serious, lacking hope and the joy she once had. She is Ahsoka the Grey, which is the opposite of who she used to be. But why did it affect her so much to discover Vader's true identity? Well, when she was on trial in the Clone Wars for a crime she did not commit, the Jedi Council turned their backs on her, even though they were aware that a guilty verdict would lead to her execution. Yeah, it was pretty bad, but Anakin discovers the real culprit, Barriss, hence proving Ahsoka's innocence. The Jedi Council invites Ahsoka back, but she walks away. She walks away from the Order, but this also meant walking away from Anakin. Despite Anakin being the most important person in the world to her, she chose to walk away from him. She could no longer be part of the Jedi Order, but she thinks that if she had stayed, she could have prevented Anakin's fall to the dark side, and possibly Order 66. She blames herself for all of it. This solidifies her legacy to be one of death and destruction. Death and destruction that Anakin caused, but that she deems herself to also be responsible for. How could you not be gloomy if you deem yourself responsible for millions of deaths? But at the end of this episode, after working through some of these feelings, she's back to herself. She's no longer Ahsoka the Grey. She is more like Ahsoka the White. But what triggered this switch? The lesson she learned from Anakin. When Anakin and Ahsoka meet up, he mentions Ahsoka still having the chance to live. Anakin is talking about Ahsoka actually having the will to live and continue his legacy. You see, these two things are directly tied. For Ahsoka to live, it means to carry on Anakin's legacy. And ever since Ahsoka faced Vader in Malachor, she lost the meaning of life. She has perceived her legacy to be one of war and death, as she herself says in this episode.
But my part of that legacy is one of death and war.
And for as long as she fears this legacy, she will not have the motivation to fight. And if she does not fight, she will die, as she almost did in the last episode. So Ahsoka is given a choice. You either live, which means carrying on Anakin's legacy, or you die to ensure the legacy is never passed on. These are the two options. If she really thinks that she is a part of a legacy of only war and death, and she desires to truly end it here, she must die. It's the only way to end it. Ahsoka has been scared of passing on her legacy, since it is obviously also Anakin's and therefore Vader's. She is letting this fear dictate her life. This is why she would not train Grogu, and deep down I think this is also why she has not done a better job in training Sabine. So Anakin wants to teach her to live with this fear no longer. Because as long as she is dominated by it, she will be unbalanced, which will lead to her death. She is part of his legacy, and she cannot change that. As long as she breathes, everything Anakin is lives in her, just as he says.
Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am.
This means the good and the bad, and she must accept this. But the greatest lesson right at the end is this, that she can choose to always act on the good part of that legacy. This is why it was so important for Anakin to allow Ahsoka to get the upper hand in the fight, so she could have the choice of either embracing the dark side or the light. Anakin's legacy is both, but Ahsoka can choose to act only on the light if she so chooses, and this is exactly what she does. The legacy of the dark side is indeed in her, and because of Anakin, it always will be, as we saw when she got Sith eyes, and as it was said to her long ago in the Clone Wars.
Seeds of the dark side planted by your master.
But instead of acting on it, she chose the light side. She chose not to strike Anakin. She chose not to let the dark side control her. She chooses to live to pass on the light, not the dark. She finally understands that even though both light and dark are part of her legacy, she can ensure that the light will always supersede the dark. Now let's go back to analyze the whole lesson and understand what Anakin means when he tells her that she lacks conviction and why we saw those specific flashbacks. The first two flashbacks are very early on in Ahsoka and Anakin's relationship, while the third one is right at the end. The first scene seems to take place in Teth, and the second one in Ryloth. So why these battles? Because this is when Ahsoka starts to officially become part of Anakin's legacy as his Padawan. Now there's deeper meaning to the second battle specifically, the one in Ryloth. In Clone Wars Season 1, Episode 19, Ahsoka was leading her pilots on a mission over Ryloth, but she is given orders to stop the mission because they realize they were caught in a trap.
Commander, we've been caught in a trap!
But she disobeys orders and thinks she can get her men through.
You're overreacting, Admiral. I can get us through.
Things start getting much worse, so she then decides to return. But in the process, she gets essentially all her pilots killed. So many died because of her mistake. And now that she is back here, she is reminded of everything that happened that day. That's why she says,
It was my fault. They were following my orders. I got them killed.
Here she also shows how much it bothers her to have her mistakes cost so many lives.
But our mistakes cost lives. That doesn't bother you?
She says that she does not want her legacy to be one of fighting and war, but Anakin says that they must adjust to the times. She was a soldier then, but that does not mean she has to be one now. The Siege of Mandalore flashback is when the lesson starts to really come to fruition. Ahsoka asks if a warrior is now all she is, but Anakin responds with,
Within you will be everything I am.
Very importantly, he states,
We're part of a legacy.
And this is where we see what Ahsoka's true conflict is, her belief that her legacy is one of
Death and war.
Anakin says that she is more than that, because he is more than that. But this makes things worse, because she knows that Anakin can be more dangerous than any of them realized. So to her, that means that she can also be more dangerous than others realize, which is why she says,
If I am everything you are.
He doesn't let her finish, but we know what she meant. If she is everything he is, then she also has the potential to be just as dangerous, dark, and evil as Vader. That's her greatest fear. To not only have this darkness in her, but to then pass it on to others, to a Padawan of her own, for example.
I will not start this child down that path.
And here, Anakin embraces the dark side and reminds her of the choice she has to make, that the only way to stop his legacy from being carried on is for her to die. We then get the great line,
You lack conviction.
I believe him to be referring to Ahsoka's fear that the dark side will define her story. Because right at the end, she's able to tap into the dark side enough for her eyes to become Sith eyes, but then reject it instead of letting it consume her. This is one of the greatest convictions you can have. She was lacking it before, but now that she fully tapped into the seeds of the dark side planted in her without letting it consume her, she certainly has the conviction to live without fear of letting the dark define her legacy. She no longer has to worry about the dark in her, as long as she has the conviction to reject it. Finally, we see water coming up around her, which is a symbol of how this whole experience cleansed her from her fears, worries, and burdens. And from this point on, she stops wearing fully gray clothes and starts wearing more white. She's becoming Ahsoka the White. She's no longer suppressing her playful nature. She's once again becoming the Ahsoka we love from the animated shows. Happy, playful, and hopeful. She still doesn't have the staff from the Rebels Season 4 finale, so I am wondering what else will happen in her journey. Could Anakin show up again, but as a Force ghost this time? I hope so. And I hope this helped clear up the meaning of Anakin's lesson to her. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe, and share your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.